Hey guys, so a package came in for me the other day. It is from Letter Sparrow, and recently I ordered some of her handmade watercolors to try out and share with you guys here on the channel. We've talked about a lot of different handmade watercolors, including ones that you can make yourself, and I'm really looking forward to trying out the Letter Sparrow watercolors because I believe she was one of the first people I followed on Instagram who was making handmade watercolors, and this kind of got me interested in using handmade watercolors. So I'm really excited to unbox and swatch this one with you guys today, and we'll see if the hype is all worth it. I also want to let you guys know, it's a little bit of a sneak peek, but I also ordered some handmade watercolors from Beam Paints. I've been stalking their Instagram for years now, finally bit the bullet, finally treated myself and did that. So if you're interested in handmade watercolors and trying handmade watercolors, keep an eye out for that video as well. So let's go ahead and rip open this recycled package. Go ahead and caveat that I actually don't know how long this took to reach me. I want to say less than a week. We've been looking at houses and my timeline is just all shot, but I feel like it took hardly any time at all between ordering using her online shop and receiving the package. So it does seem like mail time for Letter Sparrow watercolors is pretty quick. I also know that her stuff tends to sell out very quickly. Seems like the same happens for Beam Paints as well. She is one of the more popular handmade watercolor manufacturers, and I do believe her target demographic is calligraphers who do like watercolor calligraphy. So I'm not really her target demographic, but I do enjoy watercolor and I do make watercolor comics. So I'm excited to see how these stack up. Fairly simple. The packaging is pretty cute. So we have our watercolors in a glassine envelope tied with a bit of baker's twine. We have a business card on, looks like cellulose watercolor paper. We have a hand lettered thank you, which is a really nice touch. Also kind of leads into the target demographic being calligraphers. Thank you so much for your purchase. I truly hope my paints help to make your creative experience more enjoyable. Next restock announced via newsletter. And then we have her website and her Instagram, and she signed it. And I do appreciate personal touches like that. When we're buying handmade things, especially handmade art supplies, it is nice to see some of the hand of the artist in the packaging and in the purchase itself. It makes it much more personal. And then we have a receipt, which I appreciate. Not everyone sends receipts, so I'm gonna go ahead and slip that off camera and leave you guys to look at this. We care. Your order was mindfully packaged using eco-friendly materials in our ongoing efforts to support sustainability. And they used eco enclose. And that was actually fairly easy to open. You know, I'm gonna diverge a little bit, but as somebody who also manufactures and ships her own products, I do think a lot about reusable packaging, and I also want to make the switch to something that's more sustainable. And while there is a lot of super cute, colorful Mylar bubble wrap packaging, and the Mylar packaging is the really silvery metallic stuff, that stuff never biodegrades, and you're kind of caught between having really cute packaging that's very personalized and eco-friendly packaging that maybe doesn't reflect what you've actually made. It's not as colorful, it's not as beautiful, and it's definitely a toss-up. And as a creator who also kind of juggles that, since my comics do deal with nature themes, I really respect Letter Sparrow for opting to go for the more ecologically friendly option. So off camera, I'll let you guys look at this beautiful packaging. I have my receipt, and I ordered the Primaries, the standard Primaries. The SKU, if you guys are interested, is 11228, and I paid $53 for this little package here, and with shipping that came to $57.35. So in terms of affordable handmade watercolors, these are really on the higher end, which is fine. If you're looking for something that is also handmade by a small business that's trying to make a difference, I would recommend you guys check out Black Sheep Art Supplies. I did a review of their primary set as well, and I may end up pulling it out and comparing the two later on in the video. My goal though with any of these handmade, hand-produced watercolor reviews though is absolutely not to rip anybody apart. I am investigating, I'm checking out and appreciating as a fellow craftsperson, as a fellow artisan, and as a fellow artist, the product that they've made. And I do generally hold handmade watercolors to a slightly different standard than I hold mass-produced watercolors. But I also want to point out, this video was in no way, shape, or form sponsored by Letter Sparrow. She's not aware that I'm doing this review. I'm doing it of my own volition, and these watercolors were purchased out of my own pocket using funds from my Patreon. So if you guys enjoy the content that I create here and you want to help me continue to make it possible, please consider joining me at patreon.com/natosoup. And if you're unable to do that, I completely understand. If you'd still like to help support the channel, a few other ways you can do that. You can share this video with someone who is also interested in handmade watercolors. That helps tremendously. Please consider sharing it on your favorite forum or in your favorite Discord server. It really does mean the world to me. And honestly, I cannot tell you guys how much it brightens my day when somebody tags me on Twitter to share one of my videos. It really, really makes me very happy. You can also leave a big old thumbs up. You can leave a comment down in the comments below. You can check out the description below because I will have a transcript and links for you guys to help you guys find out more information about these. Or you could consider subscribing if you haven't done so yet. So usually with my unbox and swatches, what I do is I talk about the company a little bit, I talk about the product a little bit, and then we actually swatch the product. I'm going to do the reverse here, so if you're interested in learning more about Letter Sparrow, please stay tuned to the end of the video. I'm going to go ahead and move those aside and we can get started with our watercolors. So my primary watercolors came in a small, fairly nondescript metal tin. These are the kind that you can get in bulk on Amazon. Nothing wrong with that though. And it has a vinyl Letter Sparrow sticker on it. Inside, oh, this is a nice touch. Inside, we have a super tiny, look how cute this is, little menu or swatch palette of the watercolors included in this kit. And I wanted to go with something that I would be able to mix. So this is the primary. So we have our cool red, our cool yellow, our cool blue, and we have our warm red, warm yellow, and our warm blue. So the colors in this set are Alizarin Crimson, Cinnabar, Brilliant Yellow, Yellow Ochre, Prussian Blue, and Ultramarine Blue. And I would have liked to have seen some pigment information for these. Something I would like to see someone who makes handmade watercolors. I'm not really picky who, but something that would be really cool would be like an info doc about the pigments used and maybe where they come from, or how, if these colors are now made with synthetics, what they were traditionally made with, like ultramarine blue, for example, is actually made with a synthetic. It's not actually lapis lazuli. You know, just that sort of information for art nerds would be really cool. I do like that this is attached using a small magnet. I think that's a really clever idea. Normally I do that with, as you guys have seen, washi tape. And then there is a small piece of wax paper. And then we have our watercolors, which sadly, oh no, all right, come on you. Sadly, they have gotten, you know, all mixed up in transit and kind of stuck to each other, but it doesn't seem like any of the color has really migrated, which is nice. I also like that this little palette here has a magnetic back, and these are like makeup pans, but they have they're magnetic to this. So that's really pretty nifty and not something you see all too often. And I know Letter Sparrow does a lot of this really cool sort of unusual palette options for her watercolors. Now with the watercolors, there's not really any information about her process, the binders used, if there are any additives added. They are a little bit tacky, so I kind of feel like there's honey in the binder, but that is something else that would make this a really nice gift if there was just a little bit more information included, not just about the pigments, but maybe about the process or about the binder itself. And I know with so many handmade watercolor artists, this is basically like trade secret, and I respect that, but I think it is, you know, a suggestion worth considering for someone out there, maybe not Letter Sparrow, but for someone out there, it's a suggestion worth considering because it would definitely make your handmade watercolor business stand out, and it would definitely give people, especially people who are not familiar with watercolor or they're not familiar with handmade watercolor, it'd give them an idea of just how special this actually is. So for today's unbox and swatch, I'm going to be using this Bao Hong watercolor paper. So this is 100% cotton rag. I've used it on a few of my other watercolor unbox and swatches. And one of the reasons I'm going with this is it is a smaller pad and it's more appropriately sized. I have done a field test on this paper. I do like how it handles, so I am pretty familiar with it, and it is block bound, so we don't have to worry about buckling or kipping affecting our ability to judge the color itself. Now, since these watercolors are kind of sticky, and I'm assuming they're using honey as their humectant, although I don't smell any clove or anything like that, which is kind of unusual because that's a very popular additive with handmade watercolors. It kind of has like a cosmetic sort of smell, if you guys know what I mean. So she may be using something else to inhibit mold, but they're pretty sticky, so I'm not really going to pre-activate them too much. I've noticed that handmade watercolors have a tendency to turn, or rather honey-based watercolors have a tendency to turn to pigment soup if I let the water sit on them for too long. So I'm adding just a little bit of water. Although I did notice some of these colors already want to activate. They're already ready to go. And these are a little bit close quarters for someone who is as messy as I am. Although you do get more open pan size for your brush. So I could see this being something that calligraphers would really prefer, because you can kind of roll your brush on it rather than how I've created divots in my watercolor pans. So when I review handmade watercolors, I am looking for certain properties. There are things I do want to see and there's things I don't want to see. So I'm looking at the activation time. Once I apply the water, how much color can I apply to the page? I'm looking at granulation. I want to see some colors granulating, some colors not necessarily granulating. Basically, everything shouldn't be milled to the exact same fineness, because then you lose a lot of what makes watercolor special. I'm looking for opacity. Some colors should be kind of opaque, some should be kind of transparent. I'm not looking for colors that are entirely opaque. I'm looking for chalkiness, and by that I mean I don't want to see chalkiness. And this hasn't happened too often with the handmade watercolors that I tend to lean towards, although it did happen with the Jasper Stardust. It is so hard for me not to say Jackson Galaxy, and I apologize, Cat Whisperer. It happened to me with the Jasper Stardust palette, and I really did not care for that palette, and it's something I'm generally trying to avoid with handmade watercolors. And I'm also looking for how prone they are to relifting or smudging or smearing or turning to mud, because that's going to kind of limit how I use these watercolors. So I think these are about ready to go. It is going to be a little bit of a challenge to get my brush into this fairly small space, but it's very easy to pick up a lot of color. Alright, so just from swatching, I like how quickly these activate. They deliver strong, clear, clean color, which is really nice. And they don't overly muddy the water, which tells me I'm not dealing with a lot of optical brighteners that were added to kind of extend the pigments. It's like a way to cheap out when you're making watercolors. Not seeing that here. I would say just from these swatches, these are pretty high quality watercolors. I do find that the format of these half pans a little challenging to use. It's a little bit hard for me to get my brush in, and it's a little difficult for me to get my brush in and not make a mess. If I were a brush calligrapher, I would be using a round. I would probably be using anything from a size 1 to maybe a size 8, and that would not be as much of a problem, especially if we're using it in this orientation. So I do like seeing that these are kind of formatted for the targeted demographic. I know I'm a bit of a bycatch, so I will keep that in mind. And I could move these to basically like an aluminum plate, not an aluminum, but you guys know what I mean, a ferro plate, a ferromagnetic plate even. I could put some magnet down, y'all, and I would be able to work with these a little bit more comfortably. So this is just the format of this particular palette. If I were going to buy more Letter Sparrow colors, I could definitely change that up. While my initial swatch is dry, I'm going to lay down some swatches for some color mixing, and we're going to start with swatches for optical color mixing. So what I'm doing is I am going to apply 2 swatches of our cool yellow, 2 swatches of our warm yellow. You do want to be careful with these. They do seem to use honey as a binder, which means they are going to absorb a lot of water. So you do want to be kind of careful with how much additional water you add while you're mixing these. They do deliver a lot of color though, and I could see them being very useful for artists who don't necessarily want to have to mix color. They just want to be able to dip into the pan and go. These might be a good option for that. Basically, I can see why their target demographic likes them. And then finally, our Ultramarine Blue. So we get a lot of color in mass tone, and we don't really have to scrub at these to get that color, which I really appreciate. So the next thing I want to do is I actually want to do a little bit of manual color mixing, and I'm going to try to use what I have left on this sheet rather than getting a fresh one. So we're going to take a little bit of this brilliant yellow, and I'll just mix it over here to the side, grab a little Prussian Blue. Maybe I grabbed a little much Prussian Blue. In fact, I did. So we'll grab a little bit more of that yellow. Grab a little bit of that same yellow, and we'll grab a little Alizarin Crimson. Probably grab too much Alizarin Crimson. And I'm gonna have to clean off these half pans in between uses. But it does seem like these colors mix pretty easily together. I am interested to see what lemon ochre and what she's calling Cinnabar. Now, a true Cinnabar is pretty toxic. And this is actually the color mix I use to mix skin tones. So I don't know why I thought that was going to be something transformative, but it turned out okay. Let's grab some of this yellow here. What I want is an orange, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get really an orange using yellow ochre. Let me wipe that off. You guys do see I'm kind of struggling to get my brush in here without polluting other colors. This is kind of a tight little palette. Oh, see, and I already polluted it with blue. So I am struggling with this format a little bit. Maybe not such a tight fit. Like a slightly larger palette for these might be good. Having a little trouble mixing an orange. I don't know why, because orange is one of the easiest ones to mix. I don't know if it's a ID10T error today or what. And then I'm also kind of curious what kind of green I'm going to get mixing yellow. Oh, we didn't get a green, we got a gray. Interesting. So to me, this isn't necessarily a Primaries palette, but I do think it is a very interesting play on a Primaries palette. I'm not going to be able to mix a green with this, am I? Not really. Got some lovely grays though. But what this tells me is that this is not necessarily a traditional Primaries palette. Some of the more unusual color choices, and I'm going to clean this off camera, some of the more unusual color choices definitely affect my ability to make oranges and to make greens. So, you know, if your color theory game is not on point, you're going to struggle a little bit more with this. But I was able to make some really beautiful colors. And if your goal is not to just make, like, you know, your goal is not to just make your secondary colors, your purples, your greens, your oranges, and you're maybe doing this for lettering and you're not aiming for something super specific, I could see that being a good color selection. But I was looking for a palette in order to review this, because she offers a lot of different palettes. I was looking for a palette that had like a good mixing selection. So for me, it's a little off the mark. I do like the color selection and I like how the watercolors are made. And I think it's very clever to include a yellow ochre in lieu of like a warmer yellow. And realistically, this brilliant yellow should be able to get you a lot of the greens you want, and the oranges you want. So I don't know, might just be a Becca error today. But I'm going to let all of these dry, and then we're going to do our second layer of optical mixing on these swatches here. These swatches have had a chance to dry. Now I'm just going to go ahead and do my second layer on top of them. So we'll start with the Alizarin Crimson and apply a layer of brilliant yellow and a layer of Prussian Blue. Then on top of the brilliant yellow, we'll apply the Alizarin Crimson and the Prussian Blue. And these colors are so saturated, it's a little bit difficult to see how well they layer. On top of the Prussian Blue, we'll apply our brilliant yellow and our Alizarin Crimson. Then, on the warmer side of things, we'll apply our lemon ochre to our Cinnabar and our Ultramarine Blue to our Cinnabar. Then we'll apply Cinnabar to lemon yellow ochre and Ultramarine to our lemon yellow ochre. And you guys can see I'm kind of struggling to get my brush in there. And then Cinnabar to Ultramarine Blue and lemon yellow ochre to ultramarine blue. And of course, we won't be able to tell how well these optically blend until they actually have a chance to dry. So next, I'm going to go ahead and try to do a little bit of lifting. So we've got our water, we've got our brush, and I'm not really scrubbing hard or applying any real pressure, but it does seem like we are getting some movement. At least with the Alizarin Crimson. Next up is the Cinnabar. A little bit of lifting there as well. Then our brilliant yellow. I have a feeling all of these are going to lift. That one lifted quite a bit, and it could be the binder that she's using. And honestly, again, these are for calligraphers, not necessarily for watercolor comic artists. I don't know how many layers calligraphers might be doing, or how much they'd have to worry about lifting. So this might not be a problem for her actual target demographic. But it does seem like all the colors are fairly lifting. So while we wait for these to dry, I want to go ahead and tell you guys a little bit about Letter Sparrow. It's owned and operated by Kelly Holstrom, and fortunately we have this handy dandy business card right here, so you guys can check out the website as well as her Instagram. Letter Sparrow offers palettes, individual pans, and plastic half pans, as well as plastic whole pans that'll fit standard size palettes. They also offer a variety of pan sizes, including mini, which is half the size of this standard, their standard half pan here. The standard pan, so these here, the double pan, which is twice as much as this, regular half pans, and regular full pans. And these hold about half as much as a regular half pan. So if you purchase these, you're getting about half as much paint as you would with a half pan. The palettes are generally in themed sets, but the colors are also available open stock. So if there are particular colors or particular pigments that you really like, you will be able to order those individually. She also offers some metallics, and Letter Sparrow was launched in October of 2012. And these are vegan wet watercolors, so I guess honey is not the binder here, because honey would be vegetarian friendly, but not necessarily vegan friendly. So pigment information about the whole palette is not necessarily available on the Primaries page, but if you look up the individual colors comprising this palette, you will find pigment information. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab that for you guys. Okay, so as these continue to dry, it is a very humid day here in Southeast Louisiana. I'm impressed they're drying at all, but as these continue to dry, we're going to talk about the colors in this set and the pigments used. And this is all information from the Letter Sparrow site. And I could find this information for everything but Prussian Blue. Prussian Blue doesn't have a listing currently. She might just be out of stock for that one. So starting with Ultramarine Blue, they're using PB29. It has excellent light fastness. It's non-toxic. It is more opaque than other colors, and it has a strong tinting strength, which, yes, it does have a tendency to overpower the mixes shown here. Cinnabar Red is using PR3. It has good light fastness. It's semi-transparent. It has good tinting strength, and it's non-toxic, which means she's not using real Cinnabar, because we all know Cinnabar is very toxic. For Lemon Ochre, this is PY43. It is 100% light fast. It's transparent, and it is non-toxic. And it being so transparent and not having a particularly strong tinting strength explains a lot, because I was having a lot of difficulty mixing oranges using this color, and it's because it's getting overpowered by everything else around it. For Brilliant Yellow, it is PY74, and it has a light fastness of medium. And she doesn't really include any additional information about this Brilliant Yellow. And then for the Alizarin Crimson, this is an interesting choice here because she actually used rose madder in her Alizarin Crimson, and I think most people are now using synthetic Alizarin Crimsons that are more light fast and are not as fugitive. So she's using PR83. It has a low light fastness, it's transparent, a medium tinting strength, and it's non-toxic. Now, something a little bit disappointing is that usually if you use real rose madder, you can smell it. It has this beautiful rose smell. And these don't smell like clove oil. They don't smell like any of the other popular oils used to kind of make these less prone to, fungal growths and mold. And it doesn't smell like rose. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but I do like the format. Now, I wish I could have found the information about Prussian Blue. Unfortunately, it wasn't there, but when you guys go and check out the site, maybe she'll have relisted it and maybe it'll be available, and maybe you guys can let me know what that is down in the comments below if you guys don't mind. So these haven't fully dried, but I don't think they're going to get a whole lot better. You can definitely see which colors have really good tinting strengths and which ones don't, just because the ones that have a high tinting strength where a little goes a really long way and you might not want to use it directly from the pan, they just kind of overpower the optical mixes here. So a very light glaze of that color is going to be more effective in actually getting some color onto the paper. I also kind of feel like these are not the best for mixing. It could be the colors I got, but the color strength for some of them is actually pretty low. Whereas when you use them directly from the pans, they actually do have a lot of color. So again, I want to point out these are not really aimed at, watercolorists so much as they're more aimed at, say, calligraphers. So, different use case. And she does have a lot of really beautiful colors available. So these might not be the best palette if you're someone who likes to mix your own colors. These might be a good palette for maybe doing some travel sketches or doing some limited color sketches or doing some calligraphy, or if you just happen to really appreciate well-made handmade water. All right, so what's my verdict for the Letter Sparrow Primaries watercolor set? So I feel like a lot of thought and care seems to go into Letter Sparrow's watercolors, and this is apparent in the packaging and the website. And it seems like she's very passionate about what she does. The inclusion of info cards that include facts about the pigments used, as well as pigment and light fast information, would make these a wonderful gift. For ease of use, I probably should have gone with the double pans, which is the same amount of paint as a traditional half pan with a larger footprint, but that would have raised the price to $85, which is a bit steep for something I'm just trying out. I love the attention that goes into the metal palette, but the magnet might be a bit weak for travel. My pans were all over the place when they arrived. So if you're using this as a travel set, you might wish to put something in between as a buffer to fill that empty space. While I feel like these are lovely watercolors and Kelly's passion is apparent, it's challenging for me to recommend these to other watercolor artists like myself, as the paint to price ratio just isn't quite right, especially compared to some of the other handmade watercolors on the market. More paint per pan or a wooden box would help elevate these as a luxury watercolor. That about wraps up my review of the very tiny Letter Sparrow Primaries watercolor palette. These are definitely more of a luxury watercolor. It's something that's nice to have, it's something that's nice to support, but it's definitely not something you absolutely need to have as a watercolor artist. There was a lot that I really liked about this palette. I like the attention to detail. I like how quickly these paints activate, but there's also a lot about this palette that I'm not super hot on. I really struggled to get my brush into these thinner half pans. I'm a little bit disappointed that these standard pans contain half the paint of a half pan. If you do watercolor illustration, you're gonna run through this pretty quickly. And I'm a little bit frustrated that they're still very tacky to the touch, which makes taking them with you for plein air watercolor more of a challenge. And the price point, as somebody who makes things herself and sells the things she makes and has done conventions for years, I am all about get you that money, honey. If you have an audience that's willing to pay for what you're producing, who am I to complain? Not every product is for every price point. I do feel these fall more into the line of luxury watercolors, even for handmade watercolors, and I would like to see a little bit more paint for the price. And I do feel there's a few other things that could be done that would elevate these to something more people would feel comfortable paying, but that's not necessarily what Kelly, aka Letter Sparrow, is after, and I do respect that choice. So would I recommend these watercolors? Well, it really depends on you and your goals. If you're looking to support a company that is small business, woman-owned, located in the US, everything is handmade, and they seem to take sustainability and using eco-friendly materials very seriously, then Letter Sparrow is definitely worth your money. But if you're looking for handmade watercolors, but you're on a budget, or you want to get a lot of bang for your buck, or you're looking for really unusual colors, Letter Sparrow might not be the best fit for you. So it really boils down to what your needs are, what you want to support, and what you're comfortable with. Now, for me, generally, I paint larger watercolor illustrations. I usually start at 5x7, and if I'm doing comic pages, I'm painting around 11x14. So these quarter pans would go really quick. So this isn't really the best fit for me as a watercolor comic artist. And the fact that these pans do remain sticky for a while, and the magnet at the bottom of the palette doesn't do the best job of holding it, and they ended up all over the place when I opened them, makes them not the best fit for me as a plein air botanical watercolor artist either. But if this is a good fit for you, let me know down in the comments. I am wrong all the time. I want to hear what you guys are using these for. So I want to remind you guys that this was an unbiased, unsponsored review. I paid for these out of pocket, so all opinions are my own, and they are based on my experiences as a watercolor comic artist. They're based on my time pursuing an MFA at SCAD, and they're based on my years of reviewing watercolors. So while I might feel this way, your other favorite art supply reviewers might completely disagree with me, and that's totally legit. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I hope you found it helpful, useful, and informative. And I was really glad that I had a chance to check these out. And I'm really looking forward to receiving my Beam watercolors in the near future. So I hope you guys will stick around, consider subscribing, and check that review out as well. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day. It was so good to see you guys. It was so lovely to paint and swatch with y'all. And I hope to see you guys again really soon. So have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.